Hey there, 302. It's Jackie Ferris. On this week's show, we're going to be talking about something called pandemic stress disorder. It can do a lot of things to the body. It can rob you of sleep and cause nightmares. We're going to be hearing from a leading psychologist about how you can tackle those nightmares and make it through this very tough time. All that and more straight ahead on a very special edition of the 302. Hey, 302, it seems like we've all been under a lot of stress, staying home with our spouses, working, maybe not working, and it can all translate into some physical symptoms that can affect your health as well as your mental health and give you bad dreams. We're going to talk about all of that and give you some tools that you can use to try to get through this a little easier. We're joined now by psychologist Bob Gordon, who is an expert in the field. Dr. Gordon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good seeing you again.
Let's talk a little bit about, exactly what pandemic stress disorder is.
Okay, it's a subclass of an adjustment disorder. Adjustment disorders are common. It is an emotional reaction with anxiety, depression, anger to a real stressor. Everybody can know what that real stressor is. Divorce, losing your job, custody fight, death in the family. It makes sense to have a emotional reaction to something that's happening. In natural disasters, a pandemic. What I did, since I do research on mental disorders, the scientific study of mental disorders, that I said there's a subclass of an adjustment disorder that we're all sharing. That subclass I called pandemic stress disorder. It's helpful to put a label on it so people could say, this is what I'm feeling. Therapists could say, there's something universal going on that's just not common because we're all sharing in this disaster, the pandemic, and people are becoming symptomatic. So it's valuable putting a label on it so they can say, okay, I think I have this. Maybe I should ask for help. Maybe I should exercise more. Maybe I should rest more. At least look for some kind of coping mechanism to deal with it.
So what exactly are the symptoms of pandemic stress disorder?
Well, generally, the symptoms of an adjustment disorder is much more anxiety than you usually experience. It could also include depression. It could be anger and irritability. It could be eating too much, eating too little, overusing substances, being impatient, being horribly bored, feeling demoralized about the future. These would be common symptoms of pandemic stress disorder. The fear of dying, the fear of maybe infecting somebody, and having that guilt. And that's unique to the pandemic stress disorder.
I know that there is a lot of stress out there. There's just so much, and we're all sharing this, because everybody's at home right now. So, people shouldn't feel like, oh, this is nothing, I can deal with this. If they need help, they should, the first thing is recognizing that you have something and it's okay because we're all going through it.
That's why it's really important to talk about. There's something called social validation. And the nice thing about electronic media is there may be physical distancing, and we like to make a distinction between it's not social distancing. We don't want people to socially distance. Get on the phone, get on your Facebook or chats, and communicate. Don't socially distance, but physically we have to distance for our safety. And there's something called social validation. Do you feel like strangling your domestic partner? I do. I'm not used to feeling that way. People could say, yes, what do you do about it? Well, we kind of talk it out, or we go off to our corners and read or do jigsaw puzzles or watch a movie. That's really supportive to do that.
So that's kind of like everyday coping skills. But this can go to another level. I mean, if you don't talk about it with your partner or, you know, take a walk or do whatever it is you do to blow off steam, if you don't pay attention to yourself, self-care, then this could have real ramifications, right?
Most people are good observers of their tension levels and they'll prescribe within their own personality. Introverts, who will be the least affected by this, will go into their pile of books they've been wanting to read, close the door, and they're perfectly content. Extroverts are tearing their hair out because they get their energy from real contact with people. So it's very, very stressful. The people I worry about is the people who tend to use repression or denial, and they save up. And this could really affect their mental health and their physical health if they don't look for some kind of a coping mechanism.
Dr. Gordon, we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk a little bit about how to not, do something negative in your home space while we're going through all of this. And also, we're going to delve into bad dreams and how to tackle those bad dreams. We'll be right back with this very special edition of the 302.
I'm Harper with Hagley Museum, and we love the 302.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Bob Gordon about, mental health and pandemic stress disorder during the lockdown that we're all experiencing. Dr. Gordon, let's talk a little bit more about, when you're in close quarters with your spouse or loved one, your kids, whatever, how can somebody just kind of manage their stress so that we can all get through this peacefully?
Well, being in a crucible in a lockdown is like a giant magnifying glass. If you have basically a good relationship, but you have been spending enough time together, well, it just magnifies everything that's been wonderful about the relationship, but you haven't been giving it enough time. And it could be like an extended honeymoon for many people. It could be really a very wonderful opportunity to just sit down and have those conversations that when you're passing each other, just being busy with life. Many couples have unresolved issues, and for years they've been sweeping things under the carpet until when they look at each other, they only see that big bulge in the carpet, and there doesn't seem to be much there. It'll magnify that. There's nowhere to hide. There's no diversions. There's no work to run off to or the soccer games. And that could lead to even things like domestic violence. I know from my colleagues in China, as I teach Chinese psychologists over internet, they said two big things happen: more pregnancies and more divorces. So it can go either way. In fact, they say they're waiting to file for their divorce until the courtroom's open for that. So it could really magnify things. The thing that I really recommend is that today therapists are skilled at doing telehealth. It could be by phone, it could be by video conferencing. I've had session consults with people. People can do couples work on the phone. It's a good time to start repairing things that you didn't think you had time to do, So that's important.
So you mentioned before, talking to your loved one or your spouse or taking a time out. Can you talk about those two coping mechanisms in this situation?
Well, we don't want things to escalate. A lot of times couples will think, well, if I can only get in the last word, she'll see my reasoning. She'll know I'm right, and I'll win the argument. Well, we all know that has never worked. It never will work. What we need to do is more listening. People need to feel understood. They don't need to win an argument. But what's intolerable for couples, if you're in a relationship and you don't feel understood by the person who counts the most to you, and that happens when you listen. And couples can work on their listening skills versus arguing their point. Because I'll tell you, relationships are never improved by arguing your point to the extent that you think you're going to win that argument. So people can work on just sitting down and saying, you know what? I know you're still angry with me about the thing when your mother's visit. We never really had a chance to talk about it. I never got a chance to really patiently try to understand your point of view. I may disagree with it, but at least I want to convey that I get where you're coming from.
Sure. So the talking is really key, especially remembering there's a reason why you married this person. And sometimes, just keeping your mouth shut can be the best thing to say, right? So, but for
Yes.
some folks, we're cooped up. And what's the value of maybe being like, hey man, I got to check out for a couple of minutes, taking a time out? What's the value in that?
Well, it's extremely valuable. If you ever have fighting kids, you say, "Okay, go to your corners," stop. So we all know about that. Um, we need to breathe, take a break, walk around, watch something, do a healthy distraction, whether it's reading, a puzzle, art, um, whatever it is, a craft, it's a little exercise. And then, like you said, think about why you first wanted to date that person. I want to go before you even married. Like when you looked at her and she looked at you, that feeling. Remember that feeling? If I could bring couples back to that, I said, what really happened after that is really not important. Your ego's got in the way. You had to win. You had to get your way. Was it really worth losing that feeling? If you could bring people back to that memory, it could really help. But what people do is they do less listening and more arguing, more trying to win. So if people take a break and they start to remember things like what it was like in the beginning, it can motivate them to say, hey, let's use this time to help repair our relationship.
Sure. And I think also thinking about what would be healthy, because sometimes, you talk about winning and losing. I think losing can be winning, especially whenever you're in a relationship with somebody. Like you said, you don't always have to have the last word. But, if it comes to the point where you need help, there's nothing wrong with reaching out and getting that, even if it, like you said, if it's just that one appointment, right, on the computer.
And listening, you think, is cheap. Well, I'm a psychotherapist. Charge a lot of money for listening. People can do it for free. It's so rare. You have experts trained to listen. Okay, that's how rare it is. Talk is cheap. Penn State did a study, and they really got a thousands of dollar grant to find out what would improve communication in a relationship. And these were communication experts, and they did all the models. They were really shocked at the finding. The finding was that contributed the most to the quality of the couple was the husband saying, yes, dear. All the fancy communication skills did not do as well as that.
That's a very valuable lesson. So, Dr. Gordon, thank you so much. We're going to take a quick break. You're watching a special edition of the 302. We'll be right back.
Listen, I'm County Executive Matt Meyer. Maybe you've been to the 215, the 609, the 301, but where it's at is at the 302.
Welcome back. We're talking about pandemic stress disorder, and one of the side effects can be bad dreams. Dr. Gordon, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to or who have reached out on Facebook, and they say they are really having some intense dreams. And it's not just one person, it's like everybody. It's a pandemic thing. So talk to me a little bit about where these bad dreams come from.
I had one last night. I woke up laughing when I thought about it. I go around the world giving conferences on diagnoses, and I get to see people all over the world, Europe, Asia, and after a while they see me, they hug me. Especially in some cultures, that's what they do. They run up and they hug you. And my dream was I'm giving a lecture. People see me, they run up and hug me, and I put up my arms and I say, no, please, don't hug me. Obviously, that comes from this new world that we're in. And I had stored this anxiety. What happens when I see people, and the instinct is for these people who haven't seen me before, I'll to come up and hug me. My brain is still processing this new reality. Now, in 1900, Freud wrote a book, Interpretation of Dreams. Now we have functional MRIs. We can look at brains when they're dreaming. Turns out that 80% of what Freud wrote in 1900 turns out to be right. Our dreams are not just random firings. It's trying to process emotions. And the emotions are from the beginning of our life to what happened before we went to sleep. The unconscious can't tell time. In the primitive limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain, it can't tell time. So things that happened to you in childhood, in school, or yesterday are combined in emotional files. Like, geez, I got to be careful. I got to wash my hands. I got to do the social distancing and all that. All of that is combined with your mother hollering at you about washing your hands. Everything is together. So it could be condensed in a dream, in that emotional file. The brain is trying to make sense out of all your emotions. That's why it's important to try to remember your dreams and to talk about your dreams. And that's why it's so important that we do dream analysis in psychoanalysis. We found it very helpful. It's a deeper level of trying to understand the emotions through your whole lifespan. And this is a trauma it needs to be talked about. Now, some people don't like talking about their feelings. I mentioned introverts. Introverts like doing a diary, or we call a mind dump, to get up in the morning, write down your dream, and write down what was the emotion in the dream. Because nouns are symbolized. They're hard to figure out. It takes a lot of training for that. You can't symbolize an emotion. If you're afraid, I always ask my patients, when you went to bed, what anxieties were you thinking of? When you're thinking about the next day, what are you worried about? Or if you're running in your dream, what are you running away from in your life? If you're hiding in the dream, I ask, what are you trying to hide from? You can't disguise the emotions, so you can get right to the heart of your dream. So when you're journaling, or if you're more extroverted and you're talking about your dream, think about what are the main emotions in the dream. And it'll help you to metabolize all these emotions that are being repressed and stored in your brain, and that affects your immune system.
So we've got two things here. We've got the extrovert and the introvert. So one journals, the other talks to a partner, but at the same time, writing or talking about how you felt, right? And what the dream was about. And then, so what do you do with it after that?
Well, what I want to clarify, you could write and talk. Most of us are mixed. I'm a mix of introvert and extrovert. I like to do both. So I'll do both. You can do both. You tell the person you're talking to, please listen. You're not Sigmund Freud. Don't give me advice. Don't interpret. Because when a mother is holding an infant, and we know about brain development, that infant needs to feel a calm mother's arms. A new mother will have a baby screaming all the time. She turns to her mother and the baby stops. Grandma holds the baby. She's relaxed. The baby feels those arms. We call that in psychotherapy the holding environment. The holding environment is calmly listening to the person. When my patient is anxious and I'm very calm, they launder their emotions through my calmness. When you talk about an anxious dream, a nightmare because of the pandemic, the best thing you can do is calmly listening and try to understand the person's emotions. That we call that emotionally laundering in the relationship. Just like the infant settles down in the calm arms of the mother or the grandmother.
And so whenever we're sharing with someone, they should listen to us, but at the same time, we should know that, if we wash our hands, if we do our physical distancing and do our best, that we're doing everything we can and kind of let ourselves off the hook, so to speak.
I like what you're saying because you're empowering people, Jackie, by saying that. You're saying, look, you're anxious. Part of anxiety is feeling victimized and helpless. When you remind people, social distancing obviously has been working. I mean, the models we're talking about millions, and now they've downgraded that to a fraction of that. It's amazing. The social distancing, the washing hands, the wearing masks is amazing how well it's working. And you empower people when you say, instead of just feeling anxious, there are things you can do, and we know it works.
All right, Dr. Gordon, thank you very much for all of your helpful tips. Just want to let folks know that if you use these tips and they're still not working for you and you still have a lot of stress, just reach out online, and there are a lot of folks that can help you. Dr. Gordon, thank you so much. We'll be right back. That'll do it for this episode of the 302. For more information on the COVID-19 pandemic, you can visit the Centers for Disease Control. That's cdc.gov. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Stay safe and healthy in the 302.
We're working kind of on two pathways right now. One is to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and the virus as it spreads across our state. We'll talk a little bit about that, or a lot about that, with respect to the situation in the lower part of our state. And at the same time, we're starting to think about and stand up an operation that will, when the time is right, reopen sectors of our economy, and trying to do that at the same time. There are a number of factors that we have to have in place in order to reopen. Most importantly, an extensive testing, contact tracing, isolation approach at a level much greater than what we're doing today in terms of testing. And so coming up with that plan, assuring the supplies and resources and the supply chain for it, as well as thinking through how to bring the staff on to do the contact tracing part of it, is a critical component of our ability to move forward.